Hello and welcome. Yet again, we've got a really nice free plugin for you to have a look at and listen to. Before we start, be sure to check out my courses on Udemy. I've got a Sound Engineering Level 1 Beginners course on there, and as the name suggests, it is for beginners. If you're new to the world of sound recording, this course contains everything you need to get started. Now, the other two courses are Sound Engineering Level 2 and, of course, are an intermediate level. One of them is dedicated entirely to EQ, and the other concentrates on compression. Links to all three courses are, of course, in the description. Okay, let's get started. The free plugin we are looking at today is this one. It's brought to us by Analog Obsession, and it's called Fetish. It is a compressor, and it's based on an old analog compressor called Uri 1176. And it looks like this. Now, of course, Uri don't exist anymore, so these days that same compressor is made by Universal Audio. And looking at the plugin after seeing that, you can of course see there's quite a similarity in the layout of the controls and so forth. So speaking of the controls, let's have a closer look at what we've got. Starting on the left, we first of all have an input volume. Now, there are two things you need to know in particular about this. One, on this compressor there is no threshold, or the threshold is actually said to be static. And so what we do with the input volume is we push up the volume so that it goes above the threshold or static threshold. And this of course gives us compression. Now, the other thing about the input volume is that it doesn't increase the volume of your audio. So this is what they call gain compensated. So no matter how much you turn this up, it doesn't make the audio any louder. It just pushes it above the static threshold. Next, we have our output gain, which is exactly what it is. And you can think of this as your gain makeup. Next, over to the right, we've got our attack. And as you can see, there aren't actually any markings on here apart from fast on the left and slow on the right. However, the blurb for this compressor tells us that the fastest attack starts at 20 microseconds and goes up to 800 microseconds, which is extremely fast. Then, of course, we have, as you expect, the release. And the release goes from 50 milliseconds up to 1.1 seconds, or 1100 milliseconds if you like. Next to this, we have the ratio. Now, with the ratio, there are only 4 ratios available. 4, 8, 12 and 20 to 1. No values in between here. We switch from one to the other. Over to the right of this again, we've got our VU meter, which shows us gain reduction. Now, down below this, we have a dry-wet control or a blend control, and this of course gives us parallel compression built right into the compressor itself. Let's have a look at the 3 switches on the far right, starting with the top one, which is labelled SLAM. According to the developer, this gives us an ultra-fast and aggressive limiting. Below this, we have a power switch, which of course turns the plug-in on and off. At the moment, it's on. And finally, below this, we have EXTSC, which just quite simply means external sidechain. So when you turn this on, the compressor is then expecting a signal in its sidechain coming from a separate track. And finally, whilst we're talking about the sidechain, over here, we have what is basically a 3-band EQ, and this is actually in the side chain. So this affects the side chain, and so will affect how the compressor reacts to audio coming in. So let's have a listen to what it sounds like. That's what we're here for. The audio for today's video is this one here, drum loop. If you've seen other videos of mine, you'll know that I'm quite fond of this one. Let's have a quick listen just so we know what we're dealing with. Let's get stuck in. Let's start compressing it. I'm going to leave it on a 4:1 ratio, and let's go for it. Okay, that sounds great. I mean, considering how fast the attack time is on this compressor, the drums still retain all their punch, which means that it's been somewhat kind to the transients in the signal. Let's hear a before and after. Let's see just how much of an effect this compressor has had on it. I'm going to start with the compressor turned on, and of course, as I'm playing back, I'll turn it off. Well, that sounds absolutely great. Really full sounding, really punchy, lots of colour. Really like it. Okay, let's push the compressor a little bit harder now. Let's get lots more gain reduction. Let's go for that. Now it's becoming more of an effect than a compressor. These drums were recorded in a particularly large room. So it measured around 30 feet by 22 feet by around 11 foot high. Really big open space. And this really brings out the sound of the room. Now, one last thing that we're going to do here is we're going to go to our mix control, or wet dry, going to make it completely dry. So just the unaffected signal. Now, as I'm playing back, I'm going to progressively bring in a little bit more of the affected signal until we get a nice mix. Let's have a listen. That to me sounds like a really nice mix of the two of them there. So one last thing, let's just do a before and after of what we've finally got. Start with the compressor engaged, as always, turn it off when it's playing back. Let's go. Well, all in all, a particularly nice sounding compressor. I think it's more than worth your while to take the time to go and download this plugin. Of course, I have left a link in the description to make that a little bit easier for you. Okay, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.